Greetings folks and welcome to another 8/16/32-bit. I'm Rob and today we're looking at what I'm calling Day 1 Game 1, which is those games that you tended to get on the release of a console if you were one of the early adopters, and it will be the first thing that you popped into your machine to play, your first experience of that system. Now, in this video, I'm taking a look at 4 games for 4 systems, and the systems I've chosen are realistically the first 4 32-bit systems to hit the market globally: the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar, the Sony PlayStation, and the Sega Saturn. Now, just to be clear on a point here, I'm not comparing these to each other. What I'm doing is I'm looking at each game and judging it based on what perception it would give you of the system that you've just spent your hard-earned money on. And bear in mind, these were not cheap systems even back in the day, so this was real early adopter stuff, and these were the games that you would expect would be absolutely superb. But anyway, without further ado, let's hit the first of those systems and we'll take a look at the Atari Jaguar. So, first up here we have Cybermorph on the Jaguar. Now, this was the game that was heavily promoted when the Jaguar was coming out, and it was the packing game for most people. And to be fair, it's not a bad showcase of the Jaguar's capabilities. You know, it's a fully 3D, relatively open world. It's all polygonal. Now, a lot of people do criticise this game, saying it's very difficult. There's the crashing into the walls where you have the lovely green-faced woman commenting on you. But once you actually get used to the controls and realise that the button for speeding up, you don't have to keep it held down, you just press it until you get to the speed that you want to be travelling at, it becomes a lot more fun and a lot easier to play. And yeah, by the standards of what was to come, it doesn't necessarily look brilliant, but when this came out, the competition you had for this was the incredibly linear, much lower resolution and much lower frame rate that you got in, say, Star Fox or Starwing, depending on where you are in the world, for the Super Nintendo. This really did look really rather impressive. To be able to get anything approaching this kind of graphical oomph at the time, you needed a very beefy PC, to be fair. You know, this was the pre-3D accelerator days, really. You know, this is before 3DFX. So to get this level of depth was generally only available on arcade hardware, and even then, the arcade hardware wasn't always running games as complex as this. Games like Virtua Racing, for example, whilst having relatively large worlds, were not open worlds, they were a confined track-based game. And, you know, this does look impressive for what it is, and yeah, you fired your Jaguar up, showed your friends, they'd be impressed. This is a console game at a time when most console games were still 2D, or, you know, using expensive accelerators like I said, such as the Super FX chip in Star Fox, to get some pretty basic low frame rate 3D performance from them. So yeah, this was a relatively impressive game for its time, and especially as a launch title for a system. But that's enough about this game. Let's move on to the next system, the 3DO. So, the packing game for the 3DO was Crash and Burn, a racing game. Now, Crash and Burn has its moments. You get a nice CG generated full motion video intro, which I've not shown here, and when you select your character, you get a little ranty video of them going on about how they're going to kick your opponent's ass. Once this is done, you get a intro to the circuit. You know, there's 5 circuits to choose from initially. Clearly there's space there for a 6th circuit, and you get a video from the circuit champion. Now, as is typical of the sort of full motion video stuff that was done in video games at the time, the quality of these human acted sequences is questionable, shall we say. Amateurish, rubbish, crap, pick your adjective. But they do add a certain charm. Now once you get into the game itself, things initially look good. You got some texture mapped backgrounds there, but the vehicles appear to be 3D rendered sprites laid on top of this texture mapped polygonal 3D background. Now don't get me wrong, this game looks good, and as with Cybermorph for the Jaguar, this is by far and away way more advanced than anything that was available on any other console at the time. Now, in terms of a showcase for the system, well, it looks pretty good, but frankly, it doesn't play brilliantly. It is a combat racer, as you can see, and it isn't that brilliant. The handling doesn't feel good, the weapons don't feel effective, and if you look carefully, the frame rate is all over the place. And yes, I know I stated at the start of this video this was captured on emulation, but I have played this on my real 3DO, and the frame rate is a little bit shoddy, which can be excused. It's a first generation 3D title for a system which was at the time doing things that no other home system had done or was doing. But it's just, yeah, whilst it looks better than other games that were out there on the market, it's not brilliant, especially when you think about some of the other things that were to come in the first year or so for the 3DO. But equally so, I would argue that this was a better day one, game one than some of the other titles that perhaps could have been released with it, especially some of the, say, heavy FMV based titles, which were very much already by that point being seen as last generation Mega CD type games. So it was interesting. Yeah, let's put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it would certainly look impressive to your friends. You'd certainly wow people with it. But in terms of playability and longevity, you'd probably be wanting something else. Anyway, let's head on over to the big boys. Now, of course, with the PlayStation, you got Ridge Racer, a conversion of the Namco arcade racing game. And wow, this was impressive at the time. This looked insanely good. And to this day, it still does, if we're going to be completely honest about it. This is a superb looking game. You know, it's got a nice smooth frame rate of 30 frames per second, which for the time was considered to be the benchmark, the gold standard. You know, games such as Crash and Burn and Need for Speed on the 3DO had struggled in the sort of 15 to 20 frames per second marker. And for a 3D game, this was the benchmark. This was 30 frames a second. It was fully texture mapped. The popping was not what you would call egregious. Yes, it's noticeable, but for the time, it was perfectly acceptable. And it was just a great game. Bright, colourful. It sounded good if the kind of Euro dance music that it uses for its soundtrack is your thing. Not my personal thing, but I do appreciate that it was an incredible bit of audio for the time. And it played well. It retained the playability of the arcade game. And yeah, I mean, you went out on launch day, you picked up your PlayStation with a copy of this, and you would have been as happy as Larry. This is an incredible piece of code for a launch title. It really did show off the huge step up that you were taking moving from, say, a Mega Drive or a Super Nintendo, or even a Jaguar or a 3DO, to the new real dawn of the 32-bit era with the PlayStation and the Saturn. This game was a superb advert for that shift, and in terms of day one, game one, this ticked all the boxes. It was everything you wanted. It was impressive, it was fun, it was playable, and despite only having realistically one track with variations, you would just keep coming back to it again and again and again and again to improve your times. This is almost a quintessential day one, game one title. Now, much like Sony, Sega also went to the arcade well with their launch packing title for their Sega Saturn with Virtua Fighter, a game which had been a huge hit in arcades across the world. And of course, this was the kind of game people wanted in the home. You know, we'd had Virtua Racing come out for the Mega Drive, and you'd had Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. But the 3D polygonal fighting of Virtua Fighter was just not really doable on the 16-bit systems. Yes, you had some attempts at aping that style with games like Balls, but this was incredible, and it looks pretty good again for a first generation game which was somewhat rushed to production given Sega's desperation to get the Saturn on the market before the PlayStation. It's pretty good. Yes, there's a few graphical glitches here and there and a bit of polygon clipping, but again, much like Ridge Racer, it looks superb, and it is a real standout showcase of the new 32-bit systems that were there on the market. This was a game you would show off to your friends and they would be blown away by it. You would be blown away by it. Like the arcade game, it's a fairly simple system, but it's deep. It will keep you coming back to it to perfect your skills. And of course, you could play it in two-player mode with your friends. It was great fun. This was a brilliant launch title, and possibly, you know, the Saturn couldn't have done any better. So there you go, 4 systems, 4 day one, game one launch titles. Now, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget, like, subscribe, ring the bell and hype the video. It all helps. You can also join my Patreon or YouTube membership if you really want to help the channel. Links are in the description below. There's also a link there if you want to make a one-off donation via Ko-fi. You can see my current channel members up on screen now. Much love to these guys. You're awesome as always. And yeah, I will see you all on the next video. Bye for now.